The courtroom doors slammed open and every head turned. She walked in wearing a dress from 3 years ago, holding two toddlers with no lawyer, no money, and dark circles under her eyes that told the story of a woman who had not slept in days. Her husband sat at the other table in a $4,000 suit, his mistress smirking from the front row, dripping in diamonds that were bought with his wife's anniversary gift budget. They thought this was going to be easy. They thought she was just a broke, discarded housewife who would sign whatever they put in front of her and disappear. They were wrong. Because when the judge opened a sealed envelope that had been delivered to his desk that morning, he did not look at the husband with approval. He looked at the wife, and his face went pale. What was in that envelope would not just end a marriage. It would expose a fraud, destroy a fortune, and prove that the most dangerous person in that courtroom was the quiet woman in the old dress holding her children's hands. But here's the part nobody expected. The husband was exactly 1 day away from legally owning everything he ever wanted. One single day, and he threw it all away for a woman who would betray him before the handcuffs clicked shut. This is not just a story. This is a warning to every person who has ever underestimated someone they thought was beneath them. Before we begin, here is what this story will teach you. It will show you that your worth is never determined by the person trying to diminish you. It will remind you that the truth, backed by evidence and patience, is more powerful than any amount of money or manipulation, and it will prove that sometimes the people who look the weakest in the room are the ones holding all the cards. If you have ever been underestimated, overlooked, or made to feel like you were not enough, this story is for you. So settle in. This one is going to stay with you long after it ends. If stories like this speak to you, take a moment right now to hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell. That way you will never miss the next chapter. And if at any point this story makes you feel something, drop a like and leave a comment telling me what hit you the hardest. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Your support is what keeps these stories coming, and trust me, the next one is even bigger. Now let us begin.
The courtroom fell into a suffocating silence as the heavy oak doors creaked open. Everyone in that Manhattan Superior Court expected a broken woman to walk through. A poor, discarded wife, a woman who would shuffle in with her head down, maybe crying, maybe trembling, begging for whatever scraps her powerful husband decided to toss her way. That is not what happened. Sarah Mitchell, COO, walked in holding two children. Her daughter, Emma, was perched on her left hip, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. Her son Jack held her right hand, his tiny fingers wrapped so tight around hers that his knuckles were white. The twins were 3 years old, dressed impeccably in matching navy outfits that Sarah had spent her last $40 on at a thrift store in Queens. Sarah herself looked like she had not slept in 2 days. Because she had not. Her brown hair, usually pulled back in a messy ponytail, hung loose around her shoulders, slightly frizzy from the humidity. She wore a gray cardigan that was 2 sizes too big, a gift from her neighbor, and a faded floral dress she had owned for 3 years. There were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. Not that she owned any concealer anymore, but her back was straight, and her eyes were dry. At the petitioner's table, on the right side of the courtroom, Ryan Prescott sat in a $4,000 Italian suit, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt so the gold cufflinks caught the light. He glanced at his Rolex. 9:05 in the morning. His wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, was late. As usual, a smirk played on his lips. Typical Sarah. Disorganized, frantic, probably smelling of baby powder and cheap laundry detergent. She did not belong in a room like this. She did not belong in his world. Not anymore. Sitting directly behind Ryan in the front row of the gallery was Vanessa Cole. She was 29, blonde, and built like a woman who had never missed a Pilates class in her life. She wore a white, designer dress and a diamond pendant that caught the fluorescent light of the courtroom and threw tiny rainbows across the ceiling. Sarah recognized that pendant. Ryan had bought it for their 5th wedding anniversary. He told Sarah the jeweler was out of stock. 2 weeks later, she saw it around Vanessa's neck on Instagram. Vanessa crossed her long, tanned legs and leaned forward, whispering just loud enough for the reporters in the back row to hear. Is she actually going to show up? Or did she finally realize she is out of her league? Ryan chuckled. He leaned back in his leather chair with the confidence of a man who had already won. Sarah is stubborn, Ness, but she is not smart. She will come. She probably thinks if she cries enough, the judge will give her the house. He tapped the thick folder in front of him. The prenuptial agreement. His lawyer, Derek Loomis, had assured him it was ironclad, unbreakable. Derek was the most expensive divorce attorney in New York City, a man who had never lost a custody case, and he was currently arranging his papers with the precision of a surgeon preparing to operate. Do not worry, Ryan added, patting Vanessa's hand across the wooden barrier. By noon, I will be a free man, and we can finally start planning that trip to Turks and Caicos. Vanessa beamed. She glanced down at her flat stomach and smiled. And our little one will have a proper last name, not like those two she drags around. She was referring to Emma and Jack. Ryan felt a flicker of irritation at the mention of them. He had never really wanted children. Sarah had insisted. She had pushed and pushed until he gave in, and now those two loud, messy, needy toddlers were the reason this divorce was going to cost him a few headlines.
All rise,
The bailiff called out, cutting through the murmurs of the packed gallery. The heavy door behind the bench opened and Judge Robert Callahan walked in. He was 62 years old, with steel gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He had been on the family court bench for 27 years. He had seen every lie, every performance, every crocodile-sawed tear that human beings were capable of producing. He did not smile. He did not frown. He simply existed as a force of judgment. Judge Callahan settled into his chair, arranged his robes, and looked over the rim of his glasses at the empty table on the left side of the courtroom. The petitioner is present, the judge said, his voice low and gravelly. Where is the respondent? Derek Loomis stood up, smoothing his tie with practiced elegance. Your Honor, it appears that Mrs. Prescott has failed to appear at the scheduled time. Given her history of instability and her lack of respect for these proceedings, we move to proceed with a default judgment in favor of my client, Mr. Prescott. Judge Callahan looked at the clock on the wall. It is 9:08, Mr. Loomis. I will give her 5 more minutes. This matter involves the custody of 2 minor children. I do not take that lightly. Vanessa let out an audible sigh of annoyance, rolling her eyes dramatically. Ryan squeezed her hand to quiet her. 5 minutes, Ryan muttered under his breath. She is probably waiting for the bus. A few people in the gallery chuckled. This divorce was headline news in New York. The press had painted it as a classic tale, the titan of industry shedding the starter wife for the upgrade. Everyone loved a winner, and Ryan Prescott looked like a winner. The minutes ticked by in silence. 9:10, 9:12, 9:13. Derek stood up again. Your Honor, with all due respect, this is a waste of the court's valuable time. My client is a busy man, and the respondent has clearly chosen not to. The double doors at the back of the courtroom flew open. They hit the walls with a crash that echoed through the room like a gunshot. Every single head turned, and there was Sarah. She stood in the doorway for exactly 2 seconds, long enough for every camera in the back row to capture her, long enough for Ryan's smirk to freeze on his face, long enough for Vanessa to stop playing with her pendant. Then Sarah walked forward. She did not look at the cameras. She did not look at the gallery. She did not look at Vanessa. Her eyes locked onto Ryan's and held them with a cold, hard resolve that he had never seen before in 7 years of marriage. I am here, Sarah said, her voice steady and clear, echoing in the quiet room. And I brought the children, because they deserve to see what the truth looks like. Judge Callahan looked at Sarah. Then he looked at the sealed envelope sitting on his desk. He had received it that morning from an anonymous source. He had spent the last hour reading its contents. "Before we proceed," the judge said slowly, his voice dropping to a tone that made Derek Loomis stop shuffling his papers, "I need to understand something about the documents I received this morning. Because if what I am reading is authentic, Mr. Prescott." The judge paused and looked directly at Ryan. "You have a very serious problem." The smirk finally died on Ryan's face. And the worst day of his life officially began. But to understand what was in that envelope, and to understand why Sarah Mitchell walked into that courtroom with iron in her spine instead of tears in her eyes, we need to go back 6 months. To the night her entire life fell apart. It was a Tuesday in October. Sarah remembered that detail because Tuesdays were her favorite day of the week. Ryan always worked late on Tuesdays, which meant she had the brownstone to herself. She would cook something simple for the twins, give them a bath, read them a story, and then sit on the couch with a glass of cheap wine and watch whatever she wanted on television without Ryan criticizing her taste. On this particular Tuesday, the twins had gone down early. Emma was fighting a cold, and Jack always fell asleep whenever his sister did, as if they operated on the same internal clock. By 7:30, the house was quiet. Sarah had poured her wine and was folding laundry on the bed she shared with Ryan when she saw it, a small gold earring. It was sitting on Ryan's nightstand, half hidden under his phone charger. It was delicate, expensive, and shaped like a tiny teardrop. Sarah did not own any gold earrings. She could not afford gold earrings. She had not bought a piece of jewelry for herself in over 2 years. She picked it up and held it under the lamp. There was a tiny maker's mark on the back. Tiffany and Company, the real kind. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed for a very long time. The laundry sat unfolded. The wine went warm. She did not cry. She did not scream. She just sat there, turning that little gold teardrop over and over in her fingers, feeling something inside her chest crack open like a fault line. She could have confronted Ryan that night. She could have called him screaming. She could have thrown his clothes out the window like they do in the movies. But Sarah Mitchell was not a screamer. She was a coder, and coders do not react on emotion. They gather data first. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah became a detective in her own marriage. She checked Ryan's credit card statements, the ones he thought she could not access because he had changed the password. He had changed it to Vanessa, with a capital V and the number 1. It took Sarah 4 guesses. What she found made her stomach turn. Hotel rooms at the Mandarin Oriental, $300 dinners at restaurants Sarah had never been to. A weekend trip to Miami that Ryan had told her was a technology conference. And jewelry. Lots of jewelry. Necklaces, bracelets, and 1 diamond pendant that cost $11,000. Their anniversary pendant. The one the jeweler was supposedly out of stock on. Sarah printed everything. She sat at the kitchen table after the twins were asleep and organized the evidence into a folder, her hands steady, her mind quiet. She labeled each printout with the date and amount. She highlighted the lies. This was not rage. This was documentation. And here is something that every person listening to this story should know, because it could save your life someday. If you ever discover that your spouse is cheating, your first instinct will be to confront them. Do not. Your second instinct will be to tell your best friend. Do not do that either. Your first move should be to document everything. Screenshot every transaction. Save every receipt. Print physical copies and store them somewhere your spouse cannot access, because once the confrontation happens, the evidence starts disappearing. Ryan proved that rule 2 weeks later. Sarah finally confronted him on a Thursday evening. She waited until the twins were asleep. She set the folder on the kitchen table. She poured 2 glasses of water, not wine, because she wanted to be completely clear-headed for this conversation. Ryan came home at 8:30. He walked into the kitchen, saw the folder, and knew immediately what it was. Sarah watched his face cycle through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, anger, and then, terrifyingly, relief. "So you found out," Ryan said. He did not sit down. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen, loosening his tie like this was a minor inconvenience. 11 months, Sarah said quietly. That is how long the credit card charges go back. Was it longer than that? Ryan shrugged. He actually shrugged. Does it matter? It matters to me. Well, maybe that is the problem, Sarah. Everything matters to you. Every little thing becomes a crisis. I forgot to call? Crisis. I worked late? Crisis. I bought the wrong kind of milk? Crisis. He pulled out a chair and sat down, not across from her, but at the head of the table. A power position. You want the truth? Fine. Yes, Vanessa and I have been seeing each other, and honestly, it has been the best year of my life. Sarah felt the words hit her chest like physical blows, but she did not flinch. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind for 14 days. She knew he would try to make this her fault. She was ready. I want you to move out, Sarah said. We can discuss the divorce terms when you have had time to. Ryan laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Move out? Sarah, I am not moving anywhere. This is my house. It is our house. Both names are on the deed. Both names are on a lot of things. But we both know who actually pays for everything around here. He leaned forward. Here's what is going to happen. I already filed for divorce. My lawyer served you this morning. Check the mailbox. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her. You already filed? 3 days ago. While you were busy playing detective with the credit card statements, I was playing chess. He tapped the table. The prenuptial agreement, Sarah. The one you signed 7 years ago without even reading. It gives you $25,000. Total. No spousal support, no claim on the company, and I am petitioning for full custody of the twins. Custody? Sarah's voice cracked for the first time. On what grounds? Financial instability. No employment history for 3 years. Emotional volatility. He counted them off on his fingers like items on a grocery list. My lawyer says it is a strong case. You have nothing, Sarah. No job, no money, no lawyer. And after today, no house. You cannot take my children. Our children. And I can provide them with the best schools, the best nannies, and the best life. What can you provide them? A studio apartment and food stamps? Sarah stared at him. This was not the man she had married. Or maybe it was, and she had just never wanted to see it. I built your company, Ryan, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I wrote the code. Ryan stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at her the way you might look at a stain on a restaurant tablecloth. Mildly annoying, easily replaced. You helped, he said. And now you are done helping. I will give you 48 hours to pack what you need. Vanessa is moving in this weekend. She has very specific ideas about the nursery, so please do not take the furniture. He walked out of the kitchen. Sarah heard the front door close. She heard his car start. She heard the engine fade down the street. Then she heard Emma crying upstairs. Probably a bad dream. Sarah stood up, walked upstairs, picked up her daughter, and held her until the crying stopped. She did the same for Jack when he woke up 20 minutes later. She spent the rest of the night packing 3 suitcases. She took the children's clothes first. then their favorite toys, then the photo albums. She did not pack a single thing for herself except underwear and the gray cardigan that had been her mother's. At 6 in the morning, she called a taxi. The driver helped her carry the suitcases down the front steps of the brownstone she had lived in for 5 years. Emma looked out the taxi window as they pulled away. "Are we going on a trip, Mommy?" Sarah smiled. It took every muscle in her face to hold that smile. "Yes, sweetie, a little adventure." She did not cry until the taxi turned the corner. The apartment was 480 square feet. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that was really just a corner with a stove, and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. It was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up building in Astoria, Queens, and the radiator made a clanking sound every 45 minutes, like a ghost with a bad knee. Sarah found it. On the 2nd day of searching, it was the only place she could afford. Ryan had frozen their joint bank accounts the morning after their confrontation, which was technically illegal in the state of New York, but extremely effective. Sarah had $612 in a personal savings account that Ryan did not know about. First month's rent was $1,400. She begged the landlord for a payment plan and promised to pay the rest within 30 days. The twins slept on a mattress on the floor. Sarah slept next to them, curled around them like a wall. Emma adjusted quickly because Emma adjusted to everything quickly. She was bold and loud and treated every new environment like an adventure. Jack was different. Jack was quiet. He stopped talking almost entirely for the first week, and when he did speak, it was only to ask one question. "When is Daddy coming?" Sarah did not know how to answer that, so she held him and said, "Daddy is busy right now, sweetheart, but Mommy is right here. Mommy is not going anywhere." She said it so many times that week that it became a kind of prayer. The first month was survival. Sarah applied for 37 jobs. She was a software engineer with a degree from Penn State and 3 years of professional experience before she left the workforce to raise the twins. On paper, she was qualified. In reality, she had a 3-year gap on her resume, no recent references that were not connected to Ryan, and 2 toddlers who needed full-time care. She got 4 callbacks. 2 of them ghosted her after the first interview. One offered her a part-time position at $19 an hour with no benefits. The 4th, a startup in Midtown, made it to the 2nd round before the hiring manager asked casually, "Are you related to Ryan Prescott, the tech guy?" Sarah said yes. The hiring manager's face changed. The call back never came. Sarah later learned that Ryan had made phone calls. Not many, just enough. A word here, a suggestion there. Unstable, difficult, going through a messy divorce. In the tight world of New York tech, it was enough to poison every well. She tried to hire a divorce attorney. The first one she met was a woman named Patricia Holloway, recommended by a legal aid website. Patricia looked at the prenuptial agreement for about 4 minutes, then took off her reading glasses and set them on the desk. "Honestly, Mrs. Prescott, this is very tight. The language is specific, the disclosures appear complete on their face, and your husband's attorney is Derek Loomis. He does not make mistakes. Can you challenge it?" "I can try. My retainer is $15,000, and I would give you maybe a 20% chance of success." Sarah did not have $15,000. She did not have $1,500. She thanked Patricia, left the office, sat on a bench outside the courthouse, and stared at the pigeons for 20 minutes. She applied for legal aid through the city's Family Court Assistance Program. The intake worker was kind but honest. "We are backed up, Mrs. Prescott. The current wait for a family law attorney is approximately 4 months. The custody hearing is in 6 weeks. I understand. I will put you on the priority list, but I cannot make promises." Sarah nodded. She picked up the twins from the elderly woman down the hall who watched them for $10 an hour, money Sarah could not afford, but could not afford not to spend. She carried them up 3 flights of stairs, because the elevator was broken again. She heated up canned soup for dinner. She gave the twins a bath in a tub that was slightly too small for both of them, and rid them, goodnight moon twice, because Jack asked for it twice, and Sarah could not say no to Jack about anything right now. Then she sat on the kitchen floor at 2 in the morning, surrounded by legal papers she did not fully understand, and she fell apart. It was not dramatic. There was no screaming. There was no throwing things. It was just a woman sitting on a linoleum floor in a tiny apartment, pressing a dish towel against her mouth so her children would not hear her cry. She cried until her ribs ached. She cried until the dish towel was soaked through, and at one point she picked up her phone, scrolled to Ryan's number, and her thumb hovered over the call button. She wanted to beg. She wanted to say she was sorry, even though she had nothing to be sorry for. She wanted to hear him say something kind, even if it was a lie, because she was so tired and so scared and so completely alone that even a false kindness would have felt like oxygen. She put the phone down. She pressed her palms against the cold floor and breathed. And then she heard a knock on her door. It was 11:30 at night, which was not a normal time for visitors in Astoria. Sarah wiped her face, checked the peephole, and opened the door. Standing in the hallway was a woman in her late 50s with curly gray hair, reading glasses perched on top of her head, and a cat tucked under one arm. She was wearing a bathrobe and slippers and holding a plate covered in aluminum foil. "I am Maggie," the woman said. "I live in 4B right below you. I can hear your little ones running around during the day, which is fine. Children should run, but I can also hear you crying at night, and that I cannot ignore." She held out the plate. "It is banana bread. I made too much. Also, I am being nosy. May I come in?" Sarah stared at her. Then she laughed. It was a strange, hiccuping laugh that was dangerously close to another round of tears. "I look like a disaster," Sarah said. "Honey, I have looked worse than Yui on a good day. Are you going to let me in, or should I stand here until the cat gets restless? He bites." Sarah let her in. They sat at the tiny kitchen table and ate banana bread at midnight while the twins slept 10 feet away. Sarah did not plan to tell Maggie anything, but Maggie had a way of asking questions that did not feel like questions. They felt like invitations. And before Sarah knew it, she had told this stranger in a bathrobe everything: the marriage, the cheating, the prenup, the frozen accounts, the custody threat. Maggie listened without interrupting. When Sarah was done, Maggie set down her fork and said, "What kind of prenup?" "The bad kind." "I was a paralegal for 30 years, Sarah, at 3 different law firms. I have seen every kind of prenup that exists. There is no such thing as an airtight one. There are only lawyers who did not look hard enough." She leaned forward. "Do you have a copy?" "I have the original. I brought it when I left." "Get it." Sarah got it. Maggie put on her reading glasses, the ones from the top of her head, and read the prenuptial agreement from the first page to the last. It took her 40 minutes. Sarah watched her face for clues, but Maggie's expression did not change until page 11. "Ha," Maggie said. "What?" "This disclosure form, the one your husband filled out listing his assets at the time of signing." Maggie tapped the page. He listed Prescott Tech as being worth $50,000. That sounds about right. It was just a startup back then. A startup that had already received its first round of venture capital funding. Sarah blinked. Yes, about 3 months before the wedding. $2.4 million. And he listed the company at $50,000. The silence in the kitchen was different now. It was the silence of something clicking into place. He lied on the disclosure form, Maggie said, looking at Sarah over the rim of her glasses. In New York, a prenuptial agreement is only valid if both parties entered into it with full and accurate knowledge of each other's financial standing. If one party misrepresented their assets, the entire agreement can be voided. She paused. That does not just weaken the prenup, Sarah. It could destroy it. Sarah felt something she had not felt in weeks. It was small and fragile, and she was almost afraid to name it because naming it might make it disappear. It was hope. For the next 3 weeks, Sarah's life split into 2 parallel existences. During the day, she was a mother. She fed the twins scrambled eggs for breakfast because eggs were cheap and protein-rich. She took them to the free playground on 31st Street. She read to them, played with them, held them when they cried, and pretended that everything was normal, even when nothing was normal. At night, after the twins were asleep, she walked down one flight of stairs to apartment 4B and became something else entirely. A researcher, a strategist, a woman building a case to save her own life. Maggie's apartment was the opposite of Sarah's. It was cluttered, warm, and smelled like coffee and cat hair. Every surface was covered with books, most of them legal texts that Maggie had kept from her decades as a paralegal. The cat, whose name was Objection, had a habit of sitting on whatever document was most important at any given moment. He knows, Maggie said one night, shooing the cat off a stack of financial disclosures. He always knows which paper matters most. It is uncanny. They worked every night from 9 until midnight, sometimes later. Maggie taught Sarah how to read legal filings. She showed her how to request financial discovery documents from the court. She explained the difference between a motion and a petition, between discovery and deposition, between what lawyers say and what lawyers mean. Derek Loomis is expensive, Maggie said one night, tapping a pen against her coffee mug. But expensive does not mean thorough. I have seen his work before. He relies on intimidation. He overwhelms the other side with paperwork and reputation. But when someone actually reads the fine print, he gets sloppy. How do you know his work? Maggie smiled a tight, knowing smile. My second husband's divorce attorney was Derek Loomis. It was 1998. He filed 4 motions with the wrong case number. The judge was not amused. You were married to someone who hired Derek Loomis. I was married 3 times, Sarah. First one was love. Second one was stupidity. Third one was spite. I do not recommend the last 2. But I learned something from each one. And what I learned from number 2 was that lawyers are only as good as the work you force them to do. Sarah laughed. It was becoming easier to laugh around Maggie. The prenup was their primary target. Maggie had identified the fraudulent disclosure form, but they needed more than just the venture capital discrepancy. They needed to prove a pattern of concealment. Sarah still had access to an old personal laptop from when she worked at Prescott Tech. Ryan had never asked for it back, probably because he had forgotten she had it. On that laptop were emails, documents, and most importantly, access to the company's old code repository. The code, Sarah said one night, staring at the laptop screen. I wrote 73% of the core algorithm, the deep learning architecture that powers the entire platform. My developer credentials are on every commit log. Commit log? Maggie looked confused. It is like a diary for code. Every time a programmer saves their work, the system records who did it and when. It is time-stamped and encrypted. You cannot fake it. And your name is on those records? My credentials are S. Mitchell. Every line I wrote is tagged with my login. Maggie put down her coffee. Sarah, that does not just affect the prenup. That affects the entire division of assets. If you can prove you built the core product of the company, You are not just a spouse entitled to a settlement. You are a co-creator entitled to equity. Sarah stared at the screen. The commit logs were all there, thousands of them, late nights and early mornings, coded in the language of a woman who had quietly built an empire, while her husband took the credit. There is a problem, Sarah said. Ryan deleted my employee file from the company records. He told the board I was just a supportive spouse who occasionally helped with testing. He deleted your file and removed my name from the current repository, but he cannot delete the backups. The original cloud backups are stored on a third-party server. They are archived automatically. Even Ryan does not have the admin rights to touch them. Can you access them? Sarah was already typing. I wrote the backup system, Maggie. I literally built the door. They retrieved the original commit logs at 1:37 in the morning. Maggie printed them on her ancient inkjet printer, which took almost an hour because there were over 200 pages. They sat on the floor of Maggie's living room, surrounded by paper, and Objection the cat walked across all of it. This is real evidence, Maggie said quietly. This changes everything. Sarah nodded, but she had learned something in the past month. Every time she thought she had found solid ground, Ryan pulled it out from under her. She was not going to celebrate yet. She was going to keep building. And there is a lesson in that for everyone listening. When you are fighting for your life, whether it is a divorce or a custody battle or any situation where someone with more power is trying to crush you, do not stop at one piece of evidence. Do not stop at two. Build your case like a wall, brick by brick, so that when they try to knock it down, it holds. Because they will try to knock it down. That is what people like Ryan do. They do not give up. They escalate. And Sarah was about to learn exactly how far Ryan Prescott was willing to go. The call came on a Monday morning, 3 weeks before the hearing. Sarah's phone buzzed while she was making oatmeal for the twins. She did not recognize the number, but she answered it because she had learned to answer every call. You never knew when it might be the legal aid office finally getting back to you. Mrs. Prescott, this is Claire Donahue. Margaret Brennan gave me your number. Claire Donahue was 28 years old. She had passed the bar exam 11 months ago. She worked at a small family law practice in Brooklyn that took pro bono cases when they could, and she had a voice that sounded like she was permanently out of breath because she talked fast and thought faster. Maggie told me about your situation, Claire said. I have reviewed the prenuptial agreement and the financial disclosures. I would like to represent you. Sarah gripped the phone. I cannot pay you. I have almost nothing. This would be pro bono, full representation through the hearing. Maggie called in a favor with my boss. She apparently helped his mother with a property dispute in 2014. He owed her. Why would you take this case? It is complicated, and Derek Loomis is a bully with a nice suit. I have been waiting for a case like this since I passed the bar. Mrs. Prescott, I am young and I am inexperienced, but I am thorough, and I believe you have a very strong case. Will you let me help? Sarah looked at the twins. Emma was putting oatmeal in Jack's hair. Jack did not seem to mind. Yes, Sarah said. Please. The next 2 weeks were intense. Claire, Sarah, and Maggie formed an unlikely legal team that operated primarily out of Maggie's apartment. Claire brought legal expertise and filings. Sarah brought the technical evidence. Maggie brought coffee, banana bread, and 30 years of knowing how courtrooms actually worked. They filed a motion to challenge the prenuptial agreement based on fraudulent asset disclosure. They prepared the code commit logs as evidence of Sarah's contributions to Prescott Tech. They documented Ryan's freezing of the joint accounts and his attempts to blacklist Sarah from employment in the tech industry. And then, exactly 12 days before the hearing, something unexpected happened. Sarah received an email from Tommy Reeves. Tommy was Ryan's college roommate and the chief financial officer of Prescott Tech. He and Ryan had been inseparable since their freshman year at Columbia. They had built the company together, or rather, Tommy had managed the money, while Ryan took the spotlight, and Sarah wrote the code that made everything work. The email was short. It read, "Sarah, I need to talk to you, not by email, not by phone, in person. It is about the company financials. There are things you need to see. Meet me at the diner on Lexington and 53rd, Wednesday at noon. Come alone. Please." Sarah showed the email to Claire and Maggie. "It is a trap," Claire said immediately. "Ryan sent him to feel you out." "Maybe," Maggie said, stroking Objection's head. "Or maybe the rats are starting to leave the ship." Sarah went to the meeting. She sat in a booth at the back of the diner and ordered a coffee she could not afford. Tommy showed up 15 minutes late, looking like he had not slept in a week. He slid into the booth across from her without making eye contact. "I am sorry," he said before Sarah could speak. "I should have said something a long time ago." "Said something about what?" Tommy opened a folder and pushed it across the table. Inside were financial statements, internal memos, and a series of emails between Ryan and Derek Loomis. "Ryan has been cooking the books," Tommy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not a lot, but enough. He has been redirecting company funds to personal accounts. The apartment for Vanessa, the jewelry, the trips, all of it came from the company operating budget, listed as consulting fees and business development expenses." Sarah flipped through the documents. Her stomach turned. "There is more," Tommy continued. "Last month, Ryan told me to delete your employee records from the system. All of them. Your personnel file, your code contributions, everything. He wanted it to look like you never worked there. I know. I found the backups." Tommy's eyes widened. "The cloud archives? I thought those were encrypted." "I built the encryption, Tommy." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he almost smiled. "You were always the smartest person in that company. Ryan knew it. That is why he was so afraid of you." "Why are you telling me this now?" Tommy looked down at his coffee. His jaw tightened. "Because he is going to pin the embezzlement on me. I can see it coming. He has been CCing me on every suspicious transaction for the last 6 months, building a paper trail that points at me. If the auditors come, I am the one who goes to prison, not him. So this is self-preservation." "It is survival," Tommy said. "Same thing you are doing?" He was right, and Sarah was not in a position to be picky about motives. Tommy agreed to testify. Claire prepared his witness statement. The case was getting stronger by the day, and here is the moment where Sarah made a mistake. She started to believe she was going to win. She allowed herself to imagine the hearing going well. She pictured the judge voiding the prenup. She pictured getting custody of the twins. She pictured finding a good job, a bigger apartment, maybe even a small house somewhere with a yard. She let hope fill her chest like a balloon, and she forgot the most important rule of fighting someone like Ryan Prescott. Never let your guard down, because the moment you think you are safe is the moment they strike. The first blow came 8 days before the hearing. Sarah was at home, reviewing documents with Claire on the phone when her email pinged. It was a legal filing from Derek Loomis, sent to the court with Sarah C. Sied. She opened it and read the first paragraph 3 times because her brain refused to process what it was saying. Ryan Prescott was filing a patent infringement claim against Sarah Mitchell. The filing alleged that any code Sarah had written during the marriage was the intellectual property of Prescott Tech, and that her attempt to use the commit logs as evidence in the divorce constituted theft of trade secrets. He is claiming I stole my own work, Sarah said to Claire, her voice flat with disbelief. It is a counterattack, Claire said quickly. He knows the commit logs are devastating, so he is trying to make them inadmissible by reframing them as stolen property. It is aggressive, but can he do this? Claire was quiet for a beat too long. It is a gray area. Employment law and intellectual property law overlap in complicated ways. If the court even entertains this motion, it could delay the hearing by months, and it puts you on defense instead of offense. Sarah hung up and sat at the kitchen table. She stared at the filing until the words blurred together. She thought about Ryan sitting in his corner office, smiling, knowing exactly what this would do to her. The second blow came 5 days before the hearing. Derek Loomis filed a motion to introduce new evidence regarding Sarah's parental fitness. The evidence was an audio recording. A voicemail Sarah had left for Ryan 2 months earlier on the worst night of her life. She had been running a fever of 102. Emma had an ear infection and had been screaming for 3 hours straight. Jack was crying because Emma was crying. The apartment was freezing because the radiator had died. Sarah had not eaten a real meal in 2 days. At 11:45 that night, delirious with exhaustion and fever, she had called Ryan's phone. It went to voicemail, and Sarah, at her absolute lowest, had said words that she did not mean and could never take back. I cannot do this anymore, Ryan. I cannot handle them alone. Sometimes I just want to walk out the door and never come back. I am so tired. I am so tired. Please, just take them for a few days. Please. On the recording, without context, without knowing about the fever or the ear infection or the broken radiator, Sarah sounded like a mother who wanted to abandon her children. Derek Loomis played the recording in his motion filing and argued it proved Sarah was emotionally unstable and unfit for custody. Sarah listened to the recording at Maggie's kitchen table. She heard her own voice, ragged and broken, and she wanted to reach through time and hold that woman and tell her it was going to be okay. He kept it, Sarah whispered. He never called me back that night, but he kept the voicemail. He kept it as ammunition, Claire said, her jaw tight. He was planning this before he even filed for divorce. The third blow was the worst. 3 days before the hearing, Sarah's phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was a woman from the New York City Department of Child Protective Services. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint about the living conditions in Sarah's apartment. An investigator would be visiting within 48 hours. Sarah knew instantly who had filed the complaint. She did not need evidence. She did not need proof. She knew it the way you know when a storm is coming by the way the air changes. She called Ryan. He picked up on the second ring. She could hear Vanessa in the background, laughing at something. Ryan, please, whatever you are trying to prove, leave the kids out of this. I do not know what you are talking about, Sarah. The CPS complaint. If someone is concerned about the welfare of my children, that sounds like a legitimate issue. Maybe you should focus on providing them with a suitable home instead of calling me. You froze my accounts. You took my home. You blacklisted me from jobs. You are the reason I am living like this, and you know it. There you go again, Ryan said, his voice smooth and practiced. Blaming everyone else. The anger, the instability. The judge is going to see it, Sarah. And when he does, those kids are coming home to a real house with a real parent. He hung up. Sarah looked around her apartment. The mattress on the floor. The milk crates she used as shelves. The crack in the ceiling she kept meaning to report. The window that did not lock properly. She had 48 hours. She did not panic. She could not afford panic. Panic was a luxury for people who had backup plans. She cleaned the apartment from floor to ceiling. She scrubbed every surface. She organized every closet. She borrowed a proper bed frame from Maggie and hauled it up 3 flights of stairs by herself. She pinned the twins' artwork on every wall. She bought fresh flowers, real ones, from the bodega on the corner, spending $8 she did not have because she needed the apartment to look like a home and not a bunker. When the CPS investigator arrived, a middle-aged man named Gerald, who looked like he had seen everything, Emma grabbed his hand the moment he walked through the door. "This is my room," Emma announced, dragging him toward the bedroom, "and that is my brother Jack. He does not talk much, but he is nice." Gerald looked around the apartment. He opened the refrigerator. He checked the bathroom. He watched the twins play. He asked Sarah the questions in a neutral voice that gave nothing away. Sarah answered everything honestly because she had nothing to hide. When he left, Gerald paused at the door. He was not supposed to say anything, but he looked at Sarah and gave her a small nod. "Children appear well-nourished, happy, and securely attached," he said, as if reading from a form he had already filled out in his head. "No concerns." The door closed. Sarah leaned against it and slid to the floor. She pressed her hands over her face and breathed. She had survived, barely. But the hearing was in 2 days, and Ryan had already proven that he would use every weapon available, including their children, to win. That night, Maggie came upstairs with a bottle of cheap wine and 2 glasses. "We survived," Sarah said, pouring. "Honey, when I was married to my second husband, I survived a kitchen fire, a tax audit, and his mother moving in, all in the same month. This is Tuesday." Sarah actually laughed. "You are tougher than you think," Maggie said, clinking her glass against Sarah's. "And that man is weaker than he looks. I have seen it 1,000 times. Men like Ryan are like buildings with no foundation. They look impressive until the wind blows." Sarah looked at her wine. "What if the wind is not strong enough? Then you blow harder." The morning of the hearing, Sarah woke up at 4:30. She could not sleep, so she did not try. She sat on the edge of the borrowed bed frame and watched the twins sleep. Jack was holding Emma's hand, as he always did, their small fingers intertwined like roots of the same tree. She showered. She put on the gray cardigan and the floral dress. Claire had offered to lend her something more professional, but Sarah said no. She did not want to pretend to be someone she was not. She was a mother who had been knocked down, and she was going to stand up in exactly the clothes she had been knocked down in. Maggie met her downstairs at 7:30. She was going to sit in the gallery and watch the twins while Sarah was at the defendant's table. "Remember," Maggie said, straightening Sarah's cardigan like a mother sending her child to the first day of school, "do not react to anything Ryan says. Do not react to anything his lawyer says. Let Claire handle the legal arguments. Your job is to be calm, clear, and honest. That is your superpower, Sarah. You tell the truth. They do not." Claire was waiting at the courthouse. She was wearing a navy blue suit that was slightly too big for her, carrying a briefcase that was slightly too full, and looking like she was about to either win her first major case or throw up. Possibly both. "Are you ready?" Sarah asked. "I have been ready for this since law school," Claire said. "Let us go." And so Sarah walked into the courtroom. She pushed open those heavy oak doors, holding Emma on her hip and Jack's hand in hers, and she walked down the center aisle while every head in the room turned to look at her. Ryan was already seated. Vanessa was in the gallery. Derek Loomis was shuffling his papers. The press was in the back row. The stage was set. Sarah sat down at the defendant's table. Claire sat beside her. The twins went to Maggie in the gallery. Emma waved at the judge. Judge Callahan's mustache twitched, which was as close to a smile as he ever got. Derek Loomis went first. He was polished. He was confident. He presented Ryan as a successful business leader and devoted father who simply wanted the best for his children. He presented Sarah as an unemployed, unstable woman living in substandard conditions with no means of support. He played the voicemail. The recording echoed through the courtroom. Sarah's voice, broken and desperate, saying the words that haunted her. I cannot do this anymore. Sometimes I just want to walk out the door and never come back. The gallery murmured. Ryan shook his head with practiced sadness. Claire stood up. She was nervous. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her briefcase. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. Your Honor, my client was recorded without consent during a moment of extreme physical and emotional distress. She was running a fever of 102 degrees. Her daughter had an ear infection. The heating in her apartment had failed. She had been awake for over 20 hours. Any parent in this courtroom would understand that moment. It was not abandonment. It was exhaustion. She paused. And it was recorded and kept by a man who never called her back. Not that night, not the next morning. He did not check on his children. He saved the voicemail because he knew, months in advance, that he was going to use it as a weapon. The murmuring shifted direction. Then Claire presented the prenuptial challenge. She laid out the fraudulent disclosure, calmly and precisely, showing that Ryan had listed his company at $50,000 when it had already received $2.4 million in venture capital funding. Derek Loomis objected. The valuation was an estimate made in good faith. An estimate that was off by 4,700% is not good faith, Your Honor, Claire replied. It is fraud. Judge Callahan studied the documents. He looked at Ryan. Mr. Prescott, did you disclose the venture capital funding when this agreement was executed? Ryan shifted in his seat. My lawyer at the time handled the paperwork. I do not recall the specifics. You do not recall receiving $2.4 million? I was a young entrepreneur. There were a lot of numbers flying around. I see. The judge made a note. He did not look impressed. Then Claire introduced the commit logs. She called a forensic technology expert, a professor from Columbia University, who testified that the code repository logs were authentic, time-stamped, and definitively showed that Sarah Mitchell's developer credentials were attached to 73% of the Prescott Tech core algorithm. Derek objected again. This evidence is the subject of a pending intellectual property claim. It should be inadmissible. Claire was ready. Your Honor, the intellectual property claim was filed 8 days ago as a strategic maneuver to suppress evidence in this proceeding. The commit logs are not stolen property. They are historical records of work performed during the marriage. They are directly relevant to the equitable division of assets, and suppressing them would deny my client due process. Judge Callahan looked at Derek Loomis the way a teacher looks at a student who has been caught cheating. Overruled, the judge said. The evidence stands. And then came Tommy Reeves. Tommy walked to the witness stand like a man walking to his own execution. His face was pale. His shirt was wrinkled. He did not look at Ryan as he was sworn in. Claire approached him with a gentle voice that belied the devastation she was about to inflict. Mr. Reeves, you are the Chief Financial Officer of Prescott Tech. Is that correct? Yes. And you have held that position for how long? Just 6 years, since the company was founded. During that time, did Mr. Prescott ever instruct you to alter company records? Tommy swallowed. Yes. The courtroom went quiet. What specifically were you instructed to alter? Sarah's employee file, her code contributions, her access logs. Ryan told me to remove everything that showed she had worked at the company as anything more than an occasional volunteer. And did you comply? Yes, I did. Tommy's voice cracked. I am not proud of it. Why did you comply? Because Ryan told me the divorce would get ugly, and that if Sarah could prove she built the algorithm, she would take half the company. He said we would all lose everything. He said it was just paperwork. Claire let the silence hang. Then she continued, Mr. Reeves, are you also aware of any misuse of company funds by Mr. Prescott? Derek Loomis shot to his feet. Objection. This is beyond the scope of... It goes directly to the division of marital assets, Your Honor, Claire said calmly. If company funds were diverted for personal use, it affects the valuation of the estate. Overruled, Judge Callahan said. Answer the question, Mr. Reeves. Tommy took a breath. Ryan has been redirecting company funds to personal expenses for the last 18 months. The apartment for Miss Cole in Tribeca, jewelry, trips, a car, all of it was listed in the company books as consulting fees and business development costs. The total is approximately $800,000. Ryan stood up. Tommy, what are you doing? We are brothers. We built this together. Sit down, Mr. Prescott, Judge Callahan ordered, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Tommy finally looked at Ryan. His expression was not anger. It was exhaustion. The exhaustion of a man who had been carrying someone else's lies for too long. You were going to pin it on me, Ryan, Tommy said quietly. I saw the emails. You CC'd me on every transaction. You were building a trail that pointed at me. If the auditors came, I was the one going to prison. That is a lie. It is not. Tommy turned to the judge. I have the emails, Your Honor. All of them. I have been keeping copies for 3 months. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Callahan banged his gavel. Derek Loomis sat down heavily, looking like a man who had just realized he was on the wrong side of history. And then the judge addressed the envelope. Before this hearing began, Judge Callahan said, the court received a sealed communication from an anonymous source. I had it authenticated by the court's forensic department this morning. I want to address it now. He opened the envelope. Inside was a USB drive. This drive contained surveillance footage from the Prescott Tech corporate office, the judge said. It was recorded 11 days ago. It shows Mr. Prescott and Miss Cole in his office at approximately 9:45 in the evening. The footage was played on a screen in the courtroom. The quality was not perfect, but the audio was clear enough. On the screen, Ryan sat behind his desk. Vanessa stood beside him, leaning over his shoulder, looking at his computer. Ryan was speaking. We need to get rid of her before she figures out what the company is actually worth. If she ever looks at the real books, it is over. Vanessa's voice came through the speakers. Just tell the judge she is crazy. Who is going to believe a housewife over you? Ryan laughed on the recording. Exactly. That is exactly right. The courtroom fell silent. Not the polite silence of before. This was the silence of a room full of people watching a man's life collapse in real time. Vanessa stood up from the gallery. Her face was white. She grabbed her purse and started moving toward the door. Miss Cole, Judge Callahan said, his voice calm as a frozen lake, I would recommend staying. Leaving now would look very bad for you. Vanessa sat back down. She looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at the screen where his own face was still frozen in a moment of arrogant laughter. He looked like a man who had just been shown a photograph of his own grave. Mr. Loomis, the judge said, would you like a recess? Derek Loomis was already packing his briefcase. He snapped the latches shut with the practiced efficiency of a man who knew when to cut his losses. Your Honor, Derek said, standing, I am withdrawing as counsel for Mr. Prescott, effective immediately. You cannot do that, Ryan said, his voice cracking. Derek, you cannot leave me. My retainer was paid from company funds that are now under question, Derek said, not making eye contact. Continuing to represent you would be a conflict of interest. I suggest you request a public defender. He walked out. The doors closed behind him with a sound that echoed through the room. Ryan sat alone at the petitioner's table. His lawyer had fled. His best friend had testified against him. His mistress was calculating the fastest route to the exit. And his wife, the woman he had called boring and simple, and beneath him, sat 10 feet away with a posture that could cut diamond. "Sarah," Ryan said, turning to her. He tried to smile. It was a broken, trembling thing. "We can work this out. Think about the kids. You do not want to do this to the father of your children." Sarah looked at him. She did not look angry. She did not look triumphant. She looked tired and sad and done. "I am thinking about the kids, Ryan," she said. "That is why I am doing this." Judge Callahan took 15 minutes to review the complete body of evidence. The courtroom waited in silence, broken only by the sound of Emma whispering to Maggie in the gallery about whether the judge was Santa Claus because he had white hair. When the judge finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man who had spent 27 years hearing lies and had finally, on this particular Tuesday morning, heard enough truth to feel something close to satisfaction. "I have reviewed the prenuptial agreement," Judge Callahan began. "The asset disclosure form signed by Mr. Prescott materially misrepresented the value of Prescott Tech at the time of execution. The company was listed at $50,000 when its actual value, based on the venture capital funding already received, was approximately $2.4 million. This is not a minor discrepancy. It is a deliberate concealment." He looked at Ryan. "The prenuptial agreement is voided." Ryan's head dropped forward. The first pillar had fallen. "Regarding the division of assets," the judge continued, "the evidence presented today, including authenticated code repository logs and the testimony of the company's chief financial officer, establishes that Mrs. Prescott was the primary architect of the core technology that drives Prescott Tech. She was not a supportive spouse who occasionally helped with testing. She was the engine of the company. The fact that her contributions were systematically erased from company records by the petitioner himself speaks to both the value of her work and the lengths Mr. Prescott was willing to go to deny her credit." He paused. "Mrs. Prescott is awarded 60% of all marital assets, including her equitable share of Prescott Tech, based on her documented contributions." Vanessa made a small choking sound from the gallery. "Regarding custody of the minor children, Emma and Jack Prescott." The judge looked at Ryan, then at Sarah, then at the twins in the gallery. Emma was drawing on a piece of paper Maggie had given her. Jack was asleep, with his head on Maggie's lap. "Full custody is awarded to the mother, Sarah Prescott. The father is granted supervised visitation every other weekend, subject to review in 6 months. The court does not make this decision lightly, but the evidence presented today paints a clear picture of a father who used his children as leverage in a financial dispute, who filed a fraudulent CPS complaint to harass their mother, and who demonstrated a consistent pattern of deception that this court finds incompatible with the best interests of the children." Ryan did not move. He sat perfectly still, like a statue of a man who used to be powerful. "Additionally," the judge said, "Mr. Prescott is ordered to pay retroactive child support for the 6 months during which he froze the marital accounts and left his wife and children without financial resources. The amount will be calculated based on his income and submitted to the court within 30 days. The judge made a final note. "The financial irregularities described in today's testimony, including the alleged embezzlement of company funds and the destruction of employer records, will be referred to the district attorney's office for investigation. This court does not have jurisdiction over criminal matters, but I will note for the record that the evidence presented today is deeply troubling." He looked up. "Is there anything else before we adjourn?" Claire stood. "No, Your Honor. And thank you." Judge Callahan looked at Sarah. For the first time in the entire proceeding, his expression softened. "Mrs. Prescott," he said, "you came into this courtroom without a penny, without a lawyer, and without anyone in your corner except a retired paralegal and a first-year attorney. You presented your case with dignity and evidence. That is all any court can ask." He paused. "Go home. Take care of your children. You have earned it." He banged his gavel. "Case closed." The courtroom erupted. The reporters surged forward. Cameras clicked. People in the gallery stood up and started talking all at once. Sarah did not hear any of it. She walked to the gallery, picked up Jack, took Emma's hand, and held them both so tight that Emma said, "Mommy, you are squishing me." "I know, baby. I know." Maggie was crying. She was pretending she was not, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue and muttering something about allergies, but she was crying. Claire was shaking. Her hands were trembling and her eyes were bright, and she looked like she had just climbed Everest in her slightly too big navy suit. "You did it," Claire said to Sarah. "We did it," Sarah said. She looked at Claire, then at Maggie. "All of us." They walked out of the courtroom together. The hallway was chaos, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, people trying to get a statement. Sarah ignored all of it. She walked straight to the elevator, holding her children, flanked by a retired paralegal with a cat named Objection and a 28-year-old lawyer who had just won her first case. In the elevator, Emma looked up at Sarah. "Mommy, did we win?" Sarah pressed the lobby button. The doors closed. The noise disappeared. "Yeah, baby," Sarah said. "We won." And here's the thing that Sarah did not say out loud, but knew in her bones. She had not won because she was rich or powerful or connected. She had won because she told the truth. In a room full of lies and lawyers and expensive suits, she had walked in wearing a 3-year-old dress and armed with nothing but evidence and honesty, and it had been enough. That is the most important lesson of this entire story. It does not matter how much money the other side has. It does not matter how many lawyers they hire, or how loud they yell, or how many dirty tricks they play. If you have the truth and you have the evidence to back it up, you can win. It will not be easy. It will not be fast. You will lose sleep and lose weight and lose faith in the process at least a dozen times. But if you keep going, if you document everything, if you find the people who believe in you and hold on to them tight, you can win. Sarah knew that now. She had lived it. 6 months later, the view from the brownstone window was not Central Park. It was not a skyline. It was a backyard in Brooklyn with a swing set and a small garden and a fence that needed painting. Sarah preferred it to any skyline in the world. She had not taken over Prescott Tech. She had not wanted to. The company was a monument to a marriage built on lies, and Sarah wanted nothing to do with monuments. She sold her 60% share in a deal brokered by Claire, who had turned out to be not just a competent attorney, but a surprisingly sharp negotiator. The sale netted Sarah enough money to buy the brownstone, set up college funds for the twins, and start over. She went back to work as a software engineer, not at a Fortune 500 company, not at a flashy startup with ping-pong tables and free kombucha. She took a position at a small company in Brooklyn that built educational technology for public schools. The pay was modest. The office was a converted warehouse. Her boss was a woman named Rachel, who wore sneakers to work and ended every meeting with, "Go home and hug your kids." It was perfect. The twins were thriving. Emma, now almost 4, had developed a passion for telling everyone exactly what she thought about everything, a trait that Sarah found both exhausting and deeply admirable. Jack had started talking more. Not a lot, but enough. His favorite word was why, which he deployed approximately 400 times a day. Maggie came over every Sunday for dinner. It had started as a standing invitation and had evolved into something closer to family. Maggie brought wine and dessert. Sarah cooked. The twins called her Grandma Maggie, which made Maggie pretend to be annoyed and secretly beam with pride. "Your sauce needs more garlic," Maggie said, one Sunday evening, peering into the pot on the stove. "Your opinion is noted and ignored," Sarah replied. Stubborn, just like your legal strategy. My legal strategy worked, because I was there to fix it. They grinned at each other. It was the easy, comfortable banter of two people who had been through a war together and come out the other side. Claire Donahue stopped by occasionally too. The case had launched her career. She had been featured in a legal journal and had received a promotion at her firm. She was currently representing two other women in similar situations pro bono, because that was the kind of person Claire was. "You started something," Claire told Sarah one afternoon over coffee. "Other women saw your case. They are finding the courage to fight back." Sarah did not know what to say to that. She had not set out to start anything. She had just been trying to survive. But if her survival helped someone else survive too, then maybe all those nights on the kitchen floor in Queens had meant something beyond her own pain. As for Ryan Prescott, he pleaded guilty to wire fraud and embezzlement 3 months after the hearing. The district attorney's investigation had uncovered even more than Tommy's testimony suggested. The total amount of misappropriated funds was $1.2 million. Ryan was sentenced to 3 years in a minimum security federal prison. He wrote to Sarah. Letters arrived every few weeks, postmarked from the correctional facility upstate. Sarah never opened them. She put them in a drawer in her desk, unopened, one on top of the other, a growing stack of words she did not need to read. Indifference, she had learned, was a far harsher punishment than anger. Tommy Reeves received probation and a steep fine. He cooperated fully with the investigation and avoided prison. The last Sarah heard, he had taken a desk job at an accounting firm in New Jersey. He sent a card when the twins turned 4. It said simply, "I am sorry, happy birthday to the kids." Sarah put it on the refrigerator because she believed in second chances, even imperfect ones. Vanessa Cole turned state's witness to avoid charges related to the embezzled funds she had received. She was placed on probation and ordered to perform 200 hours of community service. Her social media following, which had once been in the hundreds of thousands, collapsed overnight. The last Sarah heard, Vanessa was working at a department store in New Jersey. Sarah did not feel satisfaction at this news. She did not feel anything at all about Vanessa anymore, which was perhaps the healthiest outcome of all. It was a Sunday evening in April when the doorbell rang. Sarah was in the backyard with the twins. Emma was attempting to do a cartwheel and failing spectacularly. Jack was sitting in the grass, examining a ladybug with the intensity of a scientist studying a new species. "I will get it," Maggie called from inside. A moment later, Maggie appeared at the back door holding a large envelope. "Delivery," she said. "No return address." Sarah wiped her hands on her jeans and took the envelope. It was heavy, made of thick cream-colored paper. There was no return address, just her name, written in neat, formal handwriting. She opened it at the kitchen table while Maggie poured wine and the twins ate goldfish crackers on the back porch. Inside was a letter, on the letterhead, of a law firm Sarah had never heard of. Hamilton, Strauss and Associates. The letter was addressed to Sarah Ann Mitchell and began with a paragraph of legal language that took her a moment to parse. Then she reached the second paragraph and stopped breathing. Dear Miss Mitchell, we represent the estate of Dr. Harold James Mitchell, deceased. Our firm has been engaged in a comprehensive audit of Dr. Mitchell's financial holdings following the resolution of a prolonged probate dispute. This audit has revealed that Dr. Mitchell held a 12% founding stake in Meridian Biosciences, Incorporated, a biotechnology firm that was acquired earlier this year for $4.3 billion. As his sole surviving heir, you are entitled to the full value of this stake, which after applicable taxes and fees is estimated at approximately $418 million. Sarah put the letter down. She stared at it. She picked it up and read it again. Harold James Mitchell, her father, the man who had left when she was 2 years old, the man her mother never talked about except to say he was gone and was not coming back. The man Sarah had spent her entire childhood believing was a nobody who had abandoned his family because he did not care enough to stay. He had been a scientist, a researcher, a man who had helped found a biotechnology company and had apparently held onto his shares without telling anyone. He had died 3 years ago. The probate dispute had taken this long to resolve because apparently Harold Mitchell had been as messy with his paperwork as he had been with his personal relationships. Sarah sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The letter sat in front of her. The wine sat untouched. Maggie read the letter over her shoulder and said nothing for once in her life. $418 million, Sarah finally said. That is a lot of garlic, Maggie said. Sarah laughed. It was a real laugh, deep and full, the kind that comes from a place beyond humor, from a place where absurdity and wonder and exhaustion all collide. What are you going to do? Maggie asked. Sarah looked out the window at the backyard. Emma had given up on cartwheels and was now trying to teach Jack how to do a somersault. Jack was not interested. He was still looking at the ladybug. I do not know, Sarah said honestly. She folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. She put the envelope in the kitchen drawer, right next to the stack of unopened letters from Ryan. She would deal with it later, or tomorrow, or next week. Right now, her children were playing in the yard. Maggie was pouring wine. The sauce needed more garlic, even though she would never admit it. And the evening light was coming through the kitchen window in that golden way that only happens in April, when the days are getting longer and the air smells like cut grass and possibility. She had survived a marriage built on lies. She had survived a man who tried to erase her from her own life. She had survived the worst year of her existence with nothing but a retired paralegal, a first-year lawyer, a cat named Objection, and the stubborn refusal to let anyone tell her she was not enough. She did not need $418 million to know her worth. She had figured that out on a kitchen floor in Queens at 2 a.m, eating a goldfish cracker that her daughter had placed in her hand. But if the universe wanted to give her a safety net after everything she had been through, well, she was not going to argue with the universe. Sarah stood up, walked to the back porch, and sat down on the steps. Emma ran over and climbed into her lap, smelling of grass and sunscreen. Mommy, who was at the door? Nobody important, baby. Just a letter. What did it say? Sarah kissed the top of her daughter's head and watched Jack gently pick up the ladybug and place it on a leaf. It said that sometimes, when you have been through the hardest thing you can imagine, life surprises you. Not because you deserve it more than anyone else, but because you kept going. You kept going when it was dark and scary, and you did not know how it was going to end. And sometimes that is enough. Emma considered this with the seriousness of a 3-year-old evaluating a profound statement. "Can we have ice cream?" Sarah smiled. A real smile. The kind that starts in your chest and works its way up through all the broken places and comes out your eyes. "Yeah, baby, we can have ice cream." She went inside, grabbed her keys, loaded the twins into the car, and drove to the ice cream shop on Atlantic Avenue. Maggie came too, because Maggie always came too now. They sat at a picnic table outside as the sun went down, and Emma got chocolate on her nose, and Jack got vanilla on his shirt, and Maggie told a story about her third husband that was probably only half true, but was entirely hilarious. And Sarah sat there, in the golden light, surrounded by the small, imperfect, beautiful family she had built from the wreckage of the one she had lost. And she thought about all the women out there right now who were sitting on kitchen floors at 2 in the morning, wondering if they were going to make it. She wished she could tell them all the same thing. You are going to make it. Not because the universe owes you a happy ending, not because some secret inheritance is going to fall into your lap, but because you are stronger than the person trying to break you. You are smarter than you think. And the people who are supposed to be in your life, the Maggies and the Claires, and the tiny hands that put goldfish crackers in yours when you are crying on the floor, they will find you. They always find you. You just have to keep going. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you know or someone you are, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because there is more to Sarah's story. That letter in the kitchen drawer is going to change everything again. And trust me, you are not ready for what happens next. Drop a comment and tell me. Do you think Sarah should accept the inheritance from the father who abandoned her? Or is the quiet life she built worth more than any fortune? I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. And remember, never let anyone tell you that you are not enough. You are more than enough. You always were. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with real-life lessons. Every character, every twist, and every word was crafted with one purpose: to entertain you while reminding you of the strength you already carry inside. Thank you for being part of this community. We will see you in the next story.